you're saying everyone has to accept this premise that our feelings matter. When we get pushback, obviously at the higher level or middle management level is where it's going to have that big impact.
And nobody's against IQ, but there are a bunch of people out there who don't want to hear the word EQ. Why so?
Well, I think that we as a nation reinforce that IQ matters more than EQ, because it's what gets you into Yale. It's what gets you into Ivy League universities. It's what gets you into graduate school, test scores. And I tell my students all the time, I get a lot of resistance even from undergrads. They say things like, Professor Brackett, I didn't need emotional intelligence to get into Yale. And I say, well, you're going to need it to get out. And, I mean that. And because the work world doesn't want smart, narcissistic, entitled people. And I don't think most of my students are lovely, and I really am blown away by my students. But a lot of people, don't see this as an important area for growth. And I think it's because they don't know the science. In my book, I make the case, which is an incontrovertible case, by the way, that emotions matter for 5 reasons. And I'll fight till the end of my career, about this, because the data are so clear. Emotions are the drivers of our attentional capacity. They drive our decision-making. They drive the quality of our relationships. They drive our mental and our physical health. They drive our creativity and our performance. And I can give you thousands of studies to prove that. So for leaders of companies who say things like, we don't got time for feelings, I always say, well, maybe you should look at it this way. You don't have time not to deal with feelings, because your leadership skills, and especially your emotional intelligence skills, are driving the quality of the work that's happening in your organization. So when people wake up in the morning and think about you being the boss who doesn't listen, the boss who doesn't necessarily have the ability to support me in managing, my difficult times right now, that person says, I'm going to take the day off. I'm not going to put in the best effort. I'm not going to really push myself to be creative. I'm just going to let it go and kind of get my salary and move on. And we know that from the research. So again, what I tell people in the workplace is that emotions are driving the bottom line.
Everything that you're saying, that you're sharing about what we need to understand about ourselves and those big 5 reasons. So I feel like you're really fighting the good fight. As we know, the world of advertising and PR and influence has been pushing these buttons in a sort of they're just utilizing the weakness. And I feel that in this regard, I thank you, for the work in that regard too, because I don't know, there's so much chaos and a lot of fear. And we're trying to have conversations in this programming about ways to, think wisely and perhaps not out of fear. I don't know if you'd like to comment on any of that.
I just want to say that I've experienced more anxiety. I'm naturally someone who's anxious. I don't have an anxiety disorder, I don't think. But I worry about a lot, and I worry about why I worry. I even worry about why I worry about why I worry, because I don't really have that much to worry about, but like somehow or another, I worry.
Sounds like an academic.
And I say to myself, Mark, but like, you got a really good life right now. Like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, good. And that lasts for about 15 minutes, and I worry about something else. But I feel absolutely blessed that I have a lot of strategies to rely on now. As a kid, even as a young adult, my emotions drove my experience. And I believe that my experience of emotion was destiny, meaning that because I was experiencing intense, uncomfortable feelings, that was who I was. And now I see it as it's part of who I am, but it doesn't have to define who I am. And I really have excellent strategies, whether they be my self-talk strategies, whether they be my exercise, whether they be my social support networks, that when I'm experiencing this, I have the skills to call a friend and have the conversation. I can do a little mindfulness or meditation. I can say to myself, Mark, gosh, You know this feeling is impermanent. You know it, Mark. You know it. You've had it a million times before. It will go away in the morning. You're just tired. Oh yeah, you're right. Boom, go to bed and I feel better in the morning. As
It's
a kid,
almost
I never
moving
had that.
from it's almost moving from permission to feel to courage to feel. So the more you
Well,
empower
courage
yourself
to,
with the
yeah.
emotional intelligence skills and capacity to process that emotion, probably the more that we are opening ourselves to experience even stronger emotions, because every emotion brings in more information, right? So, but that comes with skill. We don't want to experience emotions that we cannot process, because eventually, if you take it to the extreme, it creates traumatic experiences. But that's why emotional intelligence in that sense is so valuable. And I'm totally with you in that fight, Mark, for more than 20 years doing research on emotions. Yes, it's important that we, with those 5 basic principles, it's a fact that emotional intelligence is important. And the emotional side of it, we can't teach emotions cognitively. There has to be other languages. And I myself found myself in a position where I need to explore things when I was trying to teach emotional intelligence to my students. And I realized that you can't just teach emotional intelligence by having people read a book. You have to focus on the nonverbal, the
Well,
senses.
it's a lived skill, right? It's like,
There's a lot of pressure on both of you in your profession to model this.
I'll give you one example.
There's a lot of pressure on me to be nuts, but I don't know.
Well, I'll give you a good example. Years ago, I taught a course on leadership for aspiring principals of schools. And they literally came from my class from the conflict management class. And so I would say, great, let's apply these principles. And I would go up to a teacher, I would do role plays. I like doing role plays. And I'd say, you're the worst freaking teacher I've ever met. I can't take it anymore. And half of them would run out of the room crying. Male, female, everything. And I was like, but I thought you just got out of conflict management. and because unless you can be in the moment with that, you're not gonna, you can't learn how to manage feelings, on paper. You've got to live it. And that's the practice.
I've decided to teach my Leading with Emotional Intelligence class after I discovered the filmmaking method, because that's when you can push students for formulating a problem, solving a problem, but not only verbally, but also non-verbally. Sometimes a look or a little, like shaking your head or something might be the trigger for the answer, and you cannot just verbalize them. A lot of non-verbal elements are there. This is a delightful conversation that I think we are building out of wisdom, Mark. And Socrates has mentioned, wisdom begins in wonder. So this is an established field now, but there's a lot more to explore. And I'm really curious about what you are curious about. So what is the next step in emotional intelligence research? What are you the most curious about?
I'll tell you, Hakan, a lot of people ask me that. What's next? What's next? What's next? And I said, I think I gave you all I got. Like writing that book really was like, I'm like, I know that book knows more than I know, because I forgot half the stuff I wrote about. But more seriously, I just want to go deeper. Deeper. I want people to practice the skills. I want them to live the skills. I want them to create communities where these skills are admired. And so, for example, in my work in schools, I've spent 25 years of my life studying and evaluating curriculum and writing lesson plans for students and teachers and leaders. And now I'm moving into where I want to think about transformation of the system. Like I want to make or support New York City in becoming an emotionally intelligent system with 1.1 million children and 150,000 educators and 2,000 leaders. Like I want to see, how do we build a sustainable, emotional intelligent system? That's really where I'm interested.
And that's a perfect transition to my last question, which is the practical side. Emotions are running high right now. And I cannot think of a better time when we can be really become aware of our need for emotional intelligence. So are we on a trajectory where emotional intelligence will become an essential need rather than a luxury or an add-on skill set and in our society? And if so, what roles do public institutions play to create sustainable systems so that we can educate our people so that they become emotionally more intelligent?
Well, when you know that emotions are the drivers of our health, you know, that children who are living in high poverty, children who are being, victimized, that their brains are being affected. They're actual, longitudinal studies to show, like, for example, that kids who are bullied, right, they just have that trauma gets, implanted in their brains. And if without good intervention, it leads to adverse life outcomes. Like, if you really understand that, you really start realizing that it is our moral obligation, right, to ensure that every kid has the permission to feel. And with that means that we, the adults who are raising and teaching kids, we're also morally obligated to be the best possible role models for them. So that's my belief. And so that means that it's not about teaching anyone, it's about developing the system. And my hope is that, this unfortunate crisis, with every crisis they say there's an opportunity. And I think, people are realizing, holy cow, right? Emotions are running high. People are falling apart. People are having panic attacks. They're afraid of going outside. They are socially isolated, lonely, frustrated. My research shows that, among 1,000 leaders, 95% of the words that they chose to use to describe how they felt were anxious, right? Anxiety, overwhelmed, stress. Kids are tired, bored, frustrated, overwhelmed, angry, sad, etc. And so we need greater emotional balance in our nation, meaning, again, it's not about getting rid of the negative and only feeling positive, but when people for 6 to 9 months are experiencing intense negative emotions for that long of a time, it has serious impacts. So my hope, again, is that we as a nation are going to take seriously the emotion education of its people.
Maybe this can be a big learning for us out of this, something that we can gain from. And in the recovery period, we put the emphasis on emotional intelligence that it deserves. And I think that brings us to an optimistic tone, doesn't it, Elisabeth?
Yes, Hakan, yes, absolutely. I want to say, Mark, I'm just personally so grateful to you for the work that you've done and that you continue to do. I encourage everyone to pick up the book, obviously, as a starter kit on Marc Brackett, Permission to Feel, and that people can also access you through the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. The gift of your time today, my friend Hakan, we're so grateful, yes?
Yes, we are so grateful, Mark. You are a wise person in emotional intelligence who walks the talk. It's been our honor to host you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate both of you.